Hello, 7th grade. Now, in our second unit on Zionism, we are going to learn about the War of Independence of 1948, meaning the war of the Jews versus almost half a dozen Arab states that led to the creation of the State of Israel. Okay, so hopefully I have it focused now. All right, so I'm going to talk about Israel's War of Independence, 1948, but before that, I think I have to give you a little bit of background. First, Israel occupied by the Ottoman Empire. The land which became the Jewish state was occupied by the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottoman Empire is this area that you see in the green here on the map. And the Ottoman Empire would eventually be called Turkey, but you see that it included the land of Israel. Now, after the Ottoman Empire lost in World War I, it was taken over by the British and called British Mandate Palestine. Now, if you see here on the map, half of British Mandate Palestine was called Palestine. So Palestine was the part that eventually became the state of Israel. And then another half is called Transjordan, and that part would become the country of Jordan. So we'll now move on to the next slide. So here you see the Ottoman Empire. That was this whole area in brown here. Sorry. Eventually, after World War I, they lost a lot of land and they become Turkey. Okay. Next, I want to talk about the UN Partition Plan 1947, the compromise. So the issue was that everyone wanted all of the land. So meaning the Jews and the Arabs both wanted all of what was called British Mandate Palestine. So how do you split it up in between the Jews and the Arabs to avoid a war? And the plan to avoid war between the Jews and the Arabs was called the UN Partition Plan. Partition Plan means to split up. A, the Arabs wanted British Mandate Palestine to be an Arab state called Palestine, and the Jews wanted it to be a Jewish state called Israel. Instead, the part of British Mandate Palestine that was called Transjordan became the country of Jordan, and the issue still remained over what to do with the area that was called Palestine. So again, the area that you see here that is called Transjordan became Jordan. The area that became Palestine, there was still an issue. What should that country become? Now, according to the UN Partition Plan, half of it was supposed to be Jewish and half of it would become an Arab state. So the area in orange would become Israel, and the part in yellow would become an Arab state called Palestine. Okay. The UN Partition Plan in 1947, which was made official by the United Nations to split Palestine into a Jewish and Arab state, was called the UN Partition Plan. It was made to be a compromise and solve the issues of the disagreement between the Jews and the Arabs, who both claimed the same land. Okay, so here again you see British Mandate Palestine and what would later become the State of Israel. Okay, so the UN told everyone about their plan to split up the land of Israel. So next I want to talk about the Jewish reaction to the partition plan. The Jews accepted the UN partition plan and the Arabs reject the plan. And what happens next in 1947, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, declares a Jewish state in 1948. And as a result, because the Arabs didn't want the Jews to have a country, 5 Arab armies of the countries of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt invaded Israel. So now if you see here, all of these countries around Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, they all attacked because they didn't want the Jews to have a country. Now, if you see in this picture here, you see the first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. There's all these famous pictures where he is standing upside down because David Ben-Gurion was into all sorts of interesting Buddhist and Eastern ideas, and he believed that by standing upside down, blood would rush to your head and it would help keep your brain young and healthy and working well. That's a random fact. All right. So once the war began, the Arabs attacked. I want to talk about how the Jews treated the Arabs who were still in Israel. So the Jewish state's policy towards the Arabs after the war began. A. 2 choices given to the Arabs in Israel. Number 1, accept the existence of Israel and follow its laws, and they can stay. 2, if you don't accept Israel and its laws, you will be expelled. You will be forced to leave Israel. Now, B, some Arabs chose to leave Israel, and the reason is the attacking Arab armies told Arabs to leave Israel temporarily to make it easier for them to take over Israel. They were promised by the 5 attacking Arab nations that they could return after they won to make way for the invading Arab armies. So again, the Arabs who were still in Israel after the war began were given a choice. Accept the existence of Israel and follow its laws, and you can stay. Don't accept Israel and its laws and be expelled. You will be forced to leave. Next, I want to talk about the Jewish army before Israel existed. So the main army was called the Haganah. So Haganah was the main Jewish army, which means defense. But there were also several other Jewish armies. So again, you had the Haganah, this is the symbol of it. You had another Jewish army called Etzel, and you had another Jewish army called Lehi. They all combined to become Tzahal or IDF. So again, F, these armies combined to become the IDF, which in Hebrew is called Tzahal, which stands for Tzva Haganah LeYisrael, Israel Defense Forces. So all of these 4 or 5 armies, I only showed you 3, these 4 or 5 pre-state Jewish armies combined, and they become the IDF, which is called in Hebrew Tzahal. Next, I want to talk about the names of the War of Independence of 1948. So Jews call it the War of Independence because the Jews saw it as their first time acquiring independence after 2,000 years of exile. Rome exiled or forced the Jews to leave Israel in the year 70 CE. So Jews call it the War of Independence because they were happy about the results of the war. They were happy that Jews finally gained independence. Now, the Arabs who lose in this war, they call it Nakba. So Nakba, which means in Arabic, catastrophe. The Arabs call it the war Nakba because they see the results of the war as a catastrophe, because they lost. In their eyes, it was a catastrophe in that land that was supposed to be an Arab state of Palestine became the Jewish state of Israel. It was occupied by people, Jews, who the Arabs saw as foreign invaders. Next, I just want to quickly talk about the results of the war. So according to the UN Partition Plan, it was supposed to be half Arabic, half Jewish. But because the Arabs attacked and they lost, almost all of this land that was called Palestine, that was supposed to be half Arabic, half Jewish, most of it becomes a Jewish state called Israel, which you see in the yellow here. And the West Bank was occupied by Jordan, and there was not an Arab state in any part of the land which was called British Mandate Palestine. So as you see here, this area which is the West Bank, that becomes a part of the country of Jordan, and this whole area in yellow becomes Israel. All right, so this war, the War of Independence of 1948, it is seen as a great triumph, almost like a miracle, in that 5 Arab armies faced off against a much smaller Jewish army, and the Jewish army actually won. And that's why it is celebrated on Yom Ha'atzmaut as a holiday. One reason why it's celebrated as a holiday is because we finally won our homeland that we had prayed for thousands of years. The second reason why this war is seen as a holiday, the second reason that we celebrate it is that 5 Arab armies, much better armed, much larger, faced off against one Jewish army, a much smaller army, lesser armed, and yet we won. That's why we celebrate this war on Yom Ha'atzmaut. All right, so next I want you guys to open up the PDF that's posted on Schoology that says War of Independence 1, and then also open up the handout that says Handout 1, War of Independence, and then you are going to work on the questions on a Google document, and I want you to call it War of Independence Adam or War of Independence Geordie. Okay, so call it War of Independence plus your name. All right, I hope that you understood everything and that you'll have no problem finishing it. All right, go Adonim Shel HaMishnah, Masters of Mishnah.